Fitness and running influencers are a dime a dozen. Some, including prior Coaching Lab guests Steve Magnus, Alex Hutchinson, Carla Mahan, and Joe Friel, bring a valuable mix of evidence-based practices and real-world experience. Unfortunately, most share myths and unsupported extrapolations that cause more harm than good. A couple of years ago, I stumbled across a new writer on the subject, Brady Holmer. He's exceptional, one of my favorites on X and Substack, at bringing the science of running and fitness to life. But he also pulls back the curtain on his own running journey. It's a fascinating combination which he effectively splices in some of the funniest posts you'll see. As he prepares to break 2:20 at the California International Marathon, I thought it'd be fun to bring him on the Coaching Lab podcast to discuss all things running, except running. From fueling and cross-training to saunas, sleep, and injuries, we're going to have fun with this one. And frankly, I have no idea where this is going to lead. If you're new to the podcast, I'm Dr. Brad Cooper, CEO of Catalyst Coaching, the nation's top-rated MBHWSC-approved health, wellness, and performance coaching institute. We've been training coaches since 2007. So if you've been thinking about pursuing certification or are already a coach looking for a strong community, we're here for you. Reach out anytime with questions, results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or check out the website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And if you're looking to integrate coaching into your organization, your life, our Catalyst One coaching may be precisely what you've been seeking. Details at catalystcoaching360.com, or you can reach out to us at that same email, results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And now, it's time to run circles around running strategies with Brady Holmer on the latest episode of the Coaching Lab podcast. We are going to go all different directions today. Neither one of us are sure where it's going to go. I've got some notes in front of me, but we'll see. Brady, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. This is fun. You're one of the few folks to come back. We're very careful about who we ask back, and you definitely deserve it. So welcome back, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Thanks for having me back. I'm honored to be one of the few repeat guests, so hopefully I will live up to the expectations.
You got this. Well, let's start off with a little game of running Would You Rather. I think you're averaging around 80 miles a week right now. Would you rather see that hit 100 for a period of time or integrate an extra, let's say, 50 miles on the bike in your training?
I would say 10 years ago, my option would be, get this up to 100. Now, I think that extra 50 miles of cross training would certainly be a little bit more beneficial for a couple of reasons. One, I think just overall reducing my injury risk, and that's part of the reason I integrate the bike anyway. But second of all, I think it's going to allow me to run those 85 to 90 miles per week with a little higher quality versus say, I hate this term, Brad, and I've even criticized the people's use of it, but junk miles, so-called junk miles. Yeah. If I were to add 15 miles to my week right now, it would be in the form of those, we'll call them junk miles, whereas the easy bike might actually help promote some recovery, help me run the 80 miles I am running per week a little more high quality and feel less kind of trashy maybe than I would adding an extra 1 to 2 hours of running.
Well, let's stay with the bike for a minute, because you have been talking about how much more you're integrating it, and I've been trying to follow the specifics. I'm seeing some where you're putting some intensity in. I'm seeing some where it's more recovery guidelines. And let's say your target audience is you're serious but not elite. So you're 60-ish miles a week of running. They've got some serious half marathon type goals. But what are you trying? What are you learning? What are you changing when it comes to those cycling miles? Is it because my approach has been generally that's my easy stuff. I just hop on. I keep it low. The power's, 160, 170, maybe 180 for a 145-pound guy. So, but I'm sensing you're adding in some intervals. You're adding in some tempo work with Zwift and some of those kinds of things. So talk us through what you're trying, what you're learning, what you're changing, and the whys behind the cycling.
My general framework behind it. So right now I'm typically doing, I would say 2 or 3 cycling sessions per week. 2 of those are usually around 2 hours each, and that's a day where I'm not running at all. So okay. I'll just do a 2 hours on Zwift. And then actually recently I've been trying to do a little bit more volume on the bike. So I've been adding an additional 45-minute to an hour session on 2 other days per week. And that's on also days when I run. You're right in that I do try to integrate a little bit more quality. I would say at least on one of those days. On one of those days where I'm doing a 2 hour session, I will typically do aerobic intervals. So it's not even high intensity intervals. These are probably going to be somewhere like upper end of zone 2, maybe lower end of zone 3. So it's hard. It feels kind of like a tempo run in terms of the effort. And I do that because I do feel like I'm getting that additional aerobic stimulus without it going way too hard and just like, frying my nervous system and doing an extra actual workout per week, but giving me a little bit of extra of that aerobic stimulus. I do find that to be helpful. And sometimes I'll actually even integrate some real high power, but short intervals in there. So maybe a, high zone 2 workout on the bike. And then I'll also have some 20 to 30 second sprints in there that are going to be at like, I don't know, 315 to 350 watts or something like that. So maybe just slightly above or, 150% of, FTP or something like that. I actually find that helps a little bit with the neuromuscular aspects of like running. And I feel like it translates pretty well. So I kind of like doing those, and they don't tire you out too much because they're so short and I'm not doing too many of them. So one of my bike workouts per week it's going to be a little bit more intense. It's not just going to be let's hop on and ride at a very leisurely pace. But then everything else is pretty much leisurely, especially, if I do 10 to 12 mile run and then hop on the bike after, it's pretty much just going to be like easy. So I might average 180, 200 watts or something like that. I'm probably the same weight as you. I'm, 145, 150 pounds, depending on the day, depending on, when you hop on the scale in the morning or at night.
Sure.
Can differ by about 10 pounds. But yeah, so, 180, 200 watts for some of those. And then maybe one day is just real light. So it's going to be 150 to 160 watts. So ultimately, a bunch of it's just replacing a lot of zone 2 running, mostly easy, but I do like doing an interval workout per week because I'm not doing a ton of high intensity running. I mean, I'm doing, maybe 10 to 12 miles per week's worth of like race pace or around race pace intervals. But that biking, I feel like allows me to just get an extra workout without the extra pounding per week. So that's kind of my framework behind it. I'll do more intense riding if I'm in an off season and I'm not doing interval workouts, but my main focus is I want the biking to enhance my fitness, but not compromise any of the running that I'm doing, essentially is my framework behind that.
All right. We've already found all these rabbit holes. I haven't even gotten to the number 2 of the Would You Rather, but that leads us into rest days. You were playing around with the idea of a full stop rest day a couple months back. Where has that gone? I'm doing the math with 2 long rides, 2 easy rides, 2 long rides on non-run days. I thought you were running 5 days a week. So have you decided against that full stop day? Are you every 30 days taking one of those? Where does the full stop rest, or if you decide, you know what, an hour easy on the bike or a couple hours on the bike, that's kind of a recovery day anyway?
The full stop rest day is probably I would say once every 3 week, maybe occurrence, once every month, probably. And it probably should be more often, to be honest. But as you know, Brad, us endurance athletes have hard time taking easy days. It's interesting though, because my kind of framework, and like, I like training a lot, but my thoughts behind it is I would honestly rather take an entire off day versus just say hop on the bike for 30 to 45 minutes. When I have a day when I train, I like to train. And when I am resting, I like to take a complete rest day. So I can kind of reserve that for, maybe I'm not going to take any really, really easy days for say 3 weeks, but then I'm going to take a full off day. And that's kind of how I like to do it. So I would say the cadence of that is probably around every 3 weeks or so. So I might get 2 per month. I might get 1 per month, just depending on the cycle. And I don't necessarily structure them in. And I know a lot of people have different opinions on whether you should structure rest days in or when you should kind of just take them. I don't like structuring them in, and that's for a few reasons. One of them is because inevitably once per month, there's going to be a day where we're traveling or something, and I would have to wake up at a ridiculous time, and it's just infeasible to get a workout in. You don't want to work out when you get to your destination, waking up at 3 a.m., even though I've done it several times. Sometimes you just don't want to do it. So it becomes infeasible due to, say, travel or logistics or something like that. Or number 2, you just wake up and you're like, no, your body's just like, no, like today's just not a day. And that for me tends to most often be the case where you just kind of wake up one morning and you're like, man, it would be a struggle to work out today. And that's just my body telling me, hey, dude, you just need to take a rest day. And so I tend to try to listen to my body, despite the fact that on those days, the workout might make you feel a little bit better. I try to heed that as a signal that, you probably need to take a rest day. So inevitably, one day per month, you're going to have one of those days when it pops up. And so I don't like to schedule rest days because one of those days is going to happen and then I'm going to end up taking an off day. And so if I schedule them, not that an extra rest day is a bad thing necessarily, but if I plan a rest day on the third Monday of every month, but then, we're, traveling or I wake up sick one day, well, that's another rest day that I didn't necessarily want to take because I took my planned one. So I kind of let them happen. They're like ad hoc rest days, I guess, is how I kind of phrase it. And yeah, those tend to occur every 3 weeks or so. Of course, I build in easy days into my routine in terms of easy intensity. But yeah, that's kind of how my rest days are looking at this point. There are runners who take a rest day every week. I applaud those people. And I'm not saying that my approach is better. Sure. I really do enjoy training. And so I think, doing one every 2 weeks, maybe even one every week would probably be okay. I know, people like to say that Clayton Young and Connor Mance, they take an off day every week, but my counter is, well, I think they're good despite the fact that they take that rest day, not because they take that rest day. If you're able to fit in 140 miles on 6 days of running, then yeah, you deserve that rest day, but most of us aren't doing that.
Right. Yeah, totally. I think I'm on the same path as you. All right.
Yeah.
Would you rather, number 2, intervals up to mile repeats or tempo/pace runs? You only get one of those two. Which one do you lean towards?
I would lean towards I would say mile repeats. That's kind of my favorite workout because it's kind of that nice blend of intervals and tempo. So I would go with that. And I would say, yeah, any interval between like 1,200 and mile repeats is kind of the sweet spot. I tend to like those a lot.
And if you were doing both, what are some of your favorite of those tempo pace type runs to have as your second big effort during the week?
Yeah, I love one of my favorite workouts, especially for say marathon, half marathon training, is say like a 3x2 mile or a 3x3 mile type of workout at say marathon pace, maybe slightly faster than marathon pace. That one I just feel like is a great stimulus. You just get into that zone of marathon pace, but it's only 2 to 3 miles, so it's not like completely exhausting you where as like a mile or a hour-long tempo might do that. So those workouts are one I love a lot. Another one that I did today that I like a lot is like 8 to 12 times 1,000 meters on the track, just at kind of a cruise pace. Like you're feeling good, you're not really pushing it, and then really shorten that rest in between. So like a 90-second rest or something. So it's almost, even especially if you're jogging that rest, it's like a sustained tempo with like a little bit of that recovery. So those are kind of two of my favorites, the 3x2 mile or a 2x3 mile. And then the 1K repeats, like 10 of those or something with a short rest. Those are always great.
And for folks that are listening, when you say cruise pace, kind of 5K-ish pace, what would that be translated to?
A little bit slower, I think. Okay. So
10K
like
pace.
10K
half
pace, half marathon pace. Yeah. Today I ended up even going a little bit slower. It kind of just depends on the goal of the workout and like where you're at in training. But yeah, half marathon pace seems to be like a good sweet spot for those.
Okay. Coffee with Brian Johnson or Nassim Taleb?
Oh no.
Now that's a little inside joke for those of you who are following him. You're going to be curious what he's going to say here, but fire away, my friend.
Yeah, well, I got to go with Brian Johnson because Brian Johnson hasn't called me the R word publicly on social media. So, no, in all honesty, I think, yeah, Brian Johnson, he, as goofy as he is, and as much as I think he's kind of like, he's memified like the longevity space, I do think he's like having fun with it, and it's a little bit of a bit. So I think he could be a lot of fun. Whereas, I'll leave my thoughts for offline on him.
Fair enough. All right. And the last one, cut sleep by 30 minutes or eliminate all strength training?
I'd say cut sleep by 30 minutes. I don't think it's ever a good idea to cut all strength training. And, with sleep, I think you could cut it by 30 minutes and probably be fine.
I thought you were going to go the other way on that one. All right.
All right.
So if you were to identify what aspect, it seems like the last 3 years you have, at least in knowledge and dialing in the why behind your how, you've really grown. I didn't know you before, so I don't know if that's true, but it seems like you've gone from being a talented runner who put in the miles and enjoyed it to there's a why behind so many elements now. If you were to identify a couple of aspects that have had the biggest influence on your running over that past 3 years, what might bubble to the surface?
I think the first one is just going to be going back to this whole idea of biking and cross training, the ability to let myself cross train a few times per week and not think I have to run every day per week. And that almost kind of arose out of necessity. I mean, I know you said, you didn't know me before, and you're kind of spot on though in how I was, operating as a runner, say like going back to my college years. It was just like, you're talented, you're young. Let's just, I'm going to run every day per week. Let's see how much I can run and not really pay attention to those other little things. I didn't think cross training was important. Obviously I knew nutrition was important, but it's kind of just like eat as much as you can and don't really pay attention to other things like that. And out of necessity, I would say these things arose because I went through a period after college where I was just suffering from bone stress injury after bone stress injury, and very frustrating, and I couldn't run consistently. And so, something had to change, and I kept reiterating and finding things that worked, and cross training arising out of that was one of those things. And I do think that's playing into some of my success in reducing my injury, because I have 2 full, off days of running per week, almost 48 hours between, every week where I'm going without running, if you really think about it, because I'm, running, taking a full off day and then running the next morning. So like 48 hours, I think that's coming a lot into play. And so that's something that's, really changed about my perspective that I think is being helpful. The second one goes back to nutrition in terms of, I've always been a good eater. I've always paid attention to what I'm eating, making sure I'm eating enough protein, carbs, obviously important for endurance athletes. But this idea of nutrition timing, I think, has really clicked in my mind recently in terms of I know it's important what you eat, but if I can change the timing of when I eat things in relation to exercise, can that actually not only help me perform better, but probably directly contribute then to reducing injury risk. And I think that has played a big role. So one of the big changes I've made there is, whereas me before would have said, if I finish a morning workout at 9:00, I might shower, I might putz around the house, I might do some work because I'll have lunch in a few hours and I'll just eat then. And then as long as I make up my calories the rest of the day, I'm fine. These days, I know that's kind of completely wrong from a performance and a recovery perspective. And I try to get in calories right after the workout, even if I don't have a huge opportunity for a meal, even if it's like a protein bar or 2, protein bar and a banana, something. Just get some calories in after the workout to kind of kickstart that recovery process. But also, I had read some research at one point, and, the carbs after a workout immediately after helping to ignite that bone recovery process as well. Super important. And it's just things like that I didn't think about before that I'm thinking about now because I'm into the science and I'm reading it, but also because, as you mentioned, it's like the why behind the how, and what's contributing to these injuries. Well, how can I get around that using, things I've read in the science and using just knowledge of how the body works and how performance and nutrition interact. So those are kind of 2 things I think I've changed. I'm trying to think of something else that, may not directly sort of relate to training, but I think overall mindset, and this will not be as maybe practical or kind of evidence-based, but just my mindset in terms of, I try not to put a lot of pressure on myself regarding training or racing. And if there's a day where I don't hold myself to this strict standard of having to do something that's planned on the schedule. If I wake up and I don't really feel like doing an interval workout I have planned, the beauty of being self-coached is that I don't have to do it. You can switch it. And today was kind of a perfect example where I'm I probably should have scrapped the workout that I had planned because I got to the track. I wasn't particularly motivated for the workout, and I did it. And I'm glad I did it, but not always, important to hold yourself to doing this. Oh, I have to do a workout on Tuesday and have to do my long run on Saturday. Well, if I feel good and I want to do my long run on a Friday, like I did last week, I just woke up, I felt good. I ran 20 miles and then I didn't do it on Saturday. So just being more flexible and realizing that consistency over time is what matters more than doing everything on a particular day per week. I think it's easy to get lost in this idea that we still have to do these things that either we did in high school or we did in college or that other people are doing. I think Strava is a fun thing. The social media, Strava is big in the news. Maybe I brought up a sore spot, but Strava is great for, motivating sometimes and seeing what other people are doing, but it can also be sort of toxic in that I log on there and see what everybody else is doing. And you wake up on a Saturday and everybody else is doing their long run. Should I be doing my long run? And it's just, the sport is so individual, and it's just like, you got to do what works for you and what makes sense for you on your, in your particular training program, rather than just following what everybody else is doing. So my mindset has shifted around that, and I just want to have fun. I just want to train hard, but while also not being as rigid as probably I once was.
Well, and I think a lot of our peers forget this is our hobby, people.
Hobby, yep.
Connor Mance makes money doing this. Nobody listening to this does. Okay, maybe there's 3 of you, but coming back to the bike combo and some of the temple stuff, I've spent a decade doing primary triathlons, Ironmans, that kind of stuff. And so I brought that mindset into, okay, if I'm training for a marathon, I want to be training on tired legs. In a triathlon, you never run rested. You never are racing that marathon without a huge amount of fatigue. Mm-hmm. So I would always build that in, bike first, then go run. Do a lot, if I'm doing a 20 miler with a little bit of, 3 by 2 miles or whatever, I'd put those toward the end. I might do a 12-mile warm up, do 3 by 2 miles, and a 2-mile warm down. Do you build that in with your marathon training, or not really?
I do sometimes. So you mean in terms of, say, biking before I go out?
Yeah,
on a
something
run?
to fatigue you and then challenge you, versus building the challenge somewhere in the middle or putting the bike at the end as a warm down.
Yeah, once a week I try to do that, where I will do, say, an hour to 90 minutes on the bike, and then I'll go out and do it. It's typically on a day when I have like a shorter run. Maybe it's going to be 7 to 10 miles. So I'll do 90 minutes on the bike, 7 to 10 miles on the run. That's sort of that pre-fatigue. And it's funny though, because it's supposed to be a pre-fatigue, but I almost inevitably feel better on the run after I bike for 90 minutes because I'm so warmed up, as long as the bike isn't too hard, obviously. Yeah. But I always, I like running first because running's the priority. So I want to make sure the run is high quality. It played more of as a factor in the summer here, where if I did a 90-minute ride, my Zwift bike is in the garage, and I live in Texas. And so if you did a 90-minute bike, you're just completely depleted, and going into a run would kind of just be kind of counterproductive maybe. So I like to run first because that's the priority, but I do build in that pre-fatigue bike maybe once a week, once every couple of weeks. I'll do that bike before the run just to tire the legs out a bit and kind of enhance that. Maybe it's like a durability session where I'm trying to go into that run a little bit fatigued, a little bit dehydrated. I will build that into there, but more often than not, it's run, and then bike is kind of secondary, either as a cool down or just as an extension of that day's training.
And with your longer runs that have some efforts in them, do you like to put the efforts toward the end, or they're right there in the middle? You kind of balance out warm up, effort, warm down.
Usually balanced, but typically it's going to be the latter 2/3 of the run are going to have that quality session. So a typical session might look like a 5 to 6 mile warm up. Then I'll do the bulk of whatever the workout is, and then maybe 3 to 4 miles down, maybe 5 to 6 miles down. So keep it even and put that quality stuff in the middle. I tend to like to skew it at least toward the end though, definitely, because I'm always going to be a little bit more warmed up, feel better, have probably hydrated, fueled a little bit during that run. So it's either the middle or kind of near to the end.
Okay. Okay, Texas heat. Let's talk about saunas. You have been integrating some sauna stuff into your training. Talk to us about the how, the why, what brought it to your attention, how it's going, how you're adjusting things, etc.
The heat training literature lately has been fun because there's a lot coming out on it. Not necessarily on the sauna. There's more kind of with this hot water exposure, but the mechanisms kind of overlap, and the sauna tends to be more people are going to be using, and preferable too, just because it's, I guess, fun might not be the right word, but the sauna is fun to use and can be relaxing. So the sauna, it's been on my radar for a while, and we know really well what the adaptations are to the sauna, whether it's for health or performance. You get the plasma volume expansion because it mimics exercise. You're getting the dehydration, you're getting the increase in heart rate, you're getting the vasodilation. So it mimics low intensity exercise, but you get all these awesome adaptations: increased red blood cells, increased hemoglobin, increased plasma volume, as well as some of that just general aerobic conditioning, although it's not exactly like it because you're not exercising in the sauna. It's passive heat therapy. You're just sitting there. So the idea, and there are several studies to support this, is that sort of if you combine the sauna with aerobic exercise, you can kind of enhance some of your adaptations, whether that be the plasma volume expansion, most notably, or the red blood cell increases, hemoglobin increases, when you pair it with it. And that means exercising, getting in the sauna sort of immediately after. You're kind of extending your exercise session, and you're sort of just getting this additional stimulus without, running or something for an extra 30 minutes. And I think, before I get into maybe why I use it and how I use it, it's important to note that a lot of people will say, well, sure, it's beneficial, but wouldn't you be better off just running for 30 extra minutes? For a lot of people, yes, because they haven't really reached that threshold of like, I'm running as much as I can, so what else can I do? So I think that for people, if you can afford to run more and it's, sauna for 30 or run for 30 extra minutes, probably do that extra running if you really want to improve your running. But if you're kind of at the upper limit of, where your body can go right now in terms of how much you can run, and you want something extra, that's kind of, I think, where the sauna comes into play. And so it is a training stimulus, and people need to think about it that way because it's stressful. It's not just free. There's no free lunch. You can overdo the sauna just like you can overdo anything else. But the way that I've been using it for the past several years is probably 2 to 3 times a week. What I like to do is either run to the gym or finish my run at home and then go to the gym immediately after. But after one of my run days, maybe not a workout day, maybe just an easy run, do my run, hop right in the sauna afterwards for 20 to 30 minutes to get that extra stimulus there. And I think one of the misconceptions, though, about this, we'll call it heat training, is that, you want to do heat training so that, if you have a race that's in the heat, you're going to perform better. I think that's one of the reasons to do it. But to be honest, Brad, I think one of the better reasons is that it helps you perform well in thermoneutral or like normal temperatures or even cool temperatures as well, because the beneficial adaptations, think of it like altitude training, I guess. You go to altitude and then you race at sea level because the adaptations you gain at altitude carry over to sea level. You have more plasma volume, more red blood cells, higher hemoglobin. Those transfer, and then you perform better at sea level because you've been training at altitude. Heat training is the exact same way. You get the beneficial adaptations from either training in the heat, whether that's outside or whether multiple layers are using the sauna like we're talking about right now. And then when you go to do a race or train in 60 Fahrenheit, 70 Fahrenheit, anything that's cooler than the sauna, you're still going to perform better because those adaptations are carrying over. So it's not necessarily about training better in the heat, although that can be one of the benefits, but it's just about training better, all the time. And I think that's one of the, maybe the misconceptions, but something that people should realize is like, you're going to perform better in, not hot, not humid environments by using this heat training. And so that's why I try to use it year round, not necessarily because I'm training for a hot race, but just as like this additional training stimulus year round. 2 to 3 times a week seems to be a sweet spot. You can do it every day, but like I said, you can sometimes feel that you're overdoing it. And if you're doing it on interval training days and you're doing it on, every single day, if you're using the sauna, it can compromise your running performance, and it can just, you can overdo it just like you can with anything else.
So in a base phase where you're doing very few intervals, high efforts, maybe that's when you get 5 or 6 days in at maybe slightly higher temperatures. And when you're dialing it up and you're bringing the heat in your workouts, maybe that's when you go to the 3 times a week, maybe drop down the heat just a touch. Is that a basic summary of the approach you're talking about?
I would say so. And I would say maybe heat is less of a variable that I play with compared to duration, because I don't have a sauna at my house. I use the one at the gym. So I can't control the temperature. Sure. All I can control is how long I'm in there. So, if I'm doing it on an interval day, or maybe it's just hot outside, but I still want to do the sauna and I'm kind of already dehydrated, I might do 20 minutes or whatever, listen to my body. But if it's a day where it's a very easy run and you're not doing intervals or something, maybe you up it to 30 to 45 minutes. So yeah, I think that would be a good protocol. And time of year even comes into play there as well. I mean, I won't say completely, but pretty much cut out the sauna during the summer when I'm training in Texas, just because
Sure.
it would be counterproductive. I mean, I'm running 90 minutes and probably losing, 8 to 10% of my body weight on a run. And if I were to go in the sauna afterwards, it would just be, like a little bit of overkill. But then when the temperatures start getting cooler over the winter, I think it's fine to bring that back in, as I'm doing now, a couple days per week.
That's helpful. We're going to be interviewing a researcher on sauna here in a couple of weeks,
Cool.
and it's going to be a fun overlap into that, because you're right, the data is just continuing to ramp up. So I love that perspective. I think I saw you mention use of a rowing machine recently. Walk us through your thoughts on that, the benefits to running. Is it literally just fiddling around 15 minutes here and there, or is it taking part of that bike time you talked to us about earlier?
Yeah, rowing is I have one, but it's something that I use infrequently. To be honest, I just use it as a warm up before my runs during the week. If I'm doing an early morning run, I'll hop on the rower for 2 to 3 minutes before my run, maybe just do some general easy rowing, maybe a few hard pulls here and there. But it's really just kind of like a full body warm up, especially in the morning when you're, trying to head out for a run at 6:30, your body's not quite warmed up yet. You want that transition into the run to be a little bit easier. I like using the rowing as a warm up. I'll maybe do it every couple of weeks for like 10, 15 minutes after a run, just as kind of an additional little bit of training, but it's kind of very infrequent. It really just is like a warm up. I warm up on the rower almost every day before a run, or even a bike in the morning. Yep.
I think that's super valuable. And then my background as a physical therapist, I'm thinking, the musculature, runners, we tend to slump. We've got no butt. Like, this is providing that 2 or 3 minutes is supplementing some of those muscles that don't get much kindness during our runs.
So would you see that as being like what would you think the benefits of like using a rowing machine might be for a runner, in addition to maybe the warm up? I mean, because I'd like to integrate it more. It's not necessarily my favorite thing to do.
Right. I'm with you.
I couldn't do it for training because I simply can't get my heart rate high enough on the rowing machine. Maybe I'm just not good at it. I don't practice it enough, but I get on there and I'm like cranking and my heart rate's at, 100 beats per minute, and I can't get it any higher. But the postural stuff is kind of interesting that you mentioned. So.
Yeah, I think that's the in my mind, that's the biggest benefit. You and I sit at a desk all day long. We go out for a run. Everything's forward, and the rowing machine creates, even if it's, and I actually like and I hate to use the word protocol, it's so overused, but I like the way you're setting that up of 2 to 3 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. You're getting that posterior chain work, those rhomboids and traps that we ignore as runners. It's balancing that out. And you're probably getting a little bit of glute work too if you're working the legs. So I actually really I had no idea what you're going to say with that. And I like the way you're setting that up. Maybe once every week, 10 days, the 10 to 15 minutes, and then the 2 to 3 minute warm up. That's that consistent posterior chain, traps, rhomboids, maybe a tiny bit of lats in there as well. So let's go right into strength training, because we're kind of talking about it already. It doesn't seem to be a focus for you, but you don't ignore it either. Thoughts, suggestions on this front, and you're talking to a 60-year-old guy here, almost a few months away. What would be your recommendations? Would those recommendations vary? Because you're what, 37?
32.
32. So would they vary for someone your age versus someone who's 50 versus maybe 70? Walk us through the conceptual elements of strength training for a runner.
Yep. Maybe I'll go through my I'll use protocol, your favorite word again. Maybe I'll go through my protocol, kind of my thoughts on it, where I think I'm lacking, what I could benefit on, and then maybe the benefits for runners at different ages. So you're kind of spot on again, where I think it's certainly not a focus, and I could do more in terms of having at least 1 or 2 dedicated days per week where I'm going to the gym for an hour and I'm just doing purely strength training. I don't, for several reasons that obviously doesn't happen. One, just the focus is on endurance training. And then 2, it's a time thing. If I had all day to train, I would do all of my endurance training and then I'd go to the gym for another hour, but I just simply don't have the time to do that. And again, I could do less endurance training and go to the gym, but trade-offs. So what my protocol kind of looks like right now is I sort of do these mini kind of strength training workouts. We'll call them like these greasing the groove type things pretty much every day during the week. So that is a mix of, I have dumbbells at my house. So maybe dumbbell curls or overhead presses, push-ups and pull-ups. I will pretty much do one or two of those every single day throughout the day while I work. So like I have a dumbbell sitting next to me at my desk like right now. So I will do 4 to 5 sets of curls throughout the entire day. And obviously this isn't a protocol to maximize your hypertrophy, but you're getting some strength work in. And I do find myself getting stronger and maybe at some point building a little bit of muscle mass doing that. And, the push-ups as well. Maybe I'll try to do 100, 150 push-ups every single day, or, 50 to 100 pull-ups on a particular day. Mix in some lower body exercises. So maybe some Bulgarian split squats, some body weight squats, some kettlebell swings. I got three different sizes of kettlebells at my house as well. So I have home gym equipment, and I'll basically just do these sort of little micro workouts. I won't say every day, but 3 to 5 days during the week, I'll do that. Typically during the work week, and then the weekend is kind of a day where I don't do those. So that's kind of my protocol there. And then, yes, I will do, I recently we moved houses, so I joined a gym and try to get like one big, at least strength training day in per week, where I'm maybe doing a heavy lower body lift and maybe supplementing that with some upper body stuff. So that's kind of what my protocol looks like. It's not fancy. It's not even necessarily progressive or that structured, but I do find that it helps me maintain and even like build some strength. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. I enjoy it. It could be better, but it also probably could be worse. Worse could be, doing nothing.
So before you go into different age groups, let's come back to the micro work. I love that concept. It makes total logical sense. And almost every person who ever said, that's what I'm going to do, the weights are gathering dust sitting next to their desk chair. So are you setting alarms? Do you have, before I go up to lunch, I'm going to do 50 push-ups? Like, what are your triggers? What are your placeholders? What are the things that have made this an automated process for you where everybody else, it's simply a paperweight?
Yeah, a lot of the times it will be sort of on an alarm. So I'll do like a 10 to 15 minute cycle. And when that goes off, you do a set of everything. I'll try to do at least 1 or 2 sets of those, say before, like right after my workout, before I actually sit down and start work during the day. And then sometimes I will have triggers to say if it's the pull-up bar, every time if I'm sitting here and I get up, I go downstairs to get some water or something, I'll do a pull-up. Like you walk out of the door, the pull-up bar is there. So you're going to do some pull-ups before that. So just kind of these mental triggers. But again, sometimes it's a lot less formal than that. It's just, okay, I've been sitting for about 20 minutes. I kind of need to move. I'm going to go do some kettlebell swings and some push-ups and then come back to my desk. But I do track everything. So I'm old school in terms of like I have a physical planner and I just like to write down stuff.
Oh man, I love it.
I'll write down how many push-ups I'm doing during the day, and just as like a little accountability. And it's that quick little dopamine hit when you write down the set of 25 that you just did. So it's things like that. And apart from the physical side, I also find that just like the way that sort of I work, like I have a hard time just coming and sitting down at my desk for like 4 hours. And it's just like those little breaks provide you with a little bit of a cognitive and a physical boost. When you might feel a little bit stale during the day. So, it's this whole idea of the exercise snacks. It literally is like during the day, I'm going to do that. And it just gives you like this little boost if you're low on energy. So it's fun too. I mean, not only do I think it's actually benefiting me physically, but I just kind of like doing it. And it's a structure that I find is actually sustainable and I can do it. If I had the glorious home gym like you, I'd probably be doing strength training 3 days per week, but I don't quite have all that equipment yet. So I'm a little bit envious of your gym, Brad. Whenever you post some pics of it, I'd be like, man, I might get too big if I had that home gym.
It's been interesting because even as a therapist, I knew the value of strength training, but I never did implement that value of strength training. And then we just started collecting stuff off Craigslist and whatever, and started compiling that. And now it's fun. It's automatic. So yeah. Okay. So for different ages, so you've kind of addressed what's working for you at 32. What would you suggest to the person who's let's say 50 and 70? So a decade into that, you lose 1% per year muscle mass after age 40. The person that's 50, the person that's 70, would your guidance vary? Again, we're talking for runners, so not general population, not general health. What would you be thinking?
Yep. Well, first of all, I would probably address the person in the age group that I'm at right now, 30 to 40, and say, okay, well, now's the time to probably
set the baseline.
optimize it, because when you're going to wait to 50 to 60, it becomes a little bit harder to build that muscle mass. So you're building kind of your muscle mass bank account like right now.
Great
So
phrase.
I should actually be, packing on as much muscle as I can. And not that that's not necessarily the goal, but you want to optimize muscle mass up until it starts to decline, as like is shown in some of the research. So addressing that age group, say, build it as much as you can right now. But that's not to say that you can't build muscle at older ages, 40, 50, 60. Heck, they even have studies showing now that like they take 80-year-olds and can build strength and muscle mass if they train them hard enough. So addressing that 50 to 60-year-old, I would say, probably your focus should skew a little bit more. You should dedicate a little bit more time to strength training at that age, just because, as you mentioned, you kind of need that stimulus to prevent the muscle mass from declining. If you don't use it, you lose it. You may not be able to build strength as easily, but if you dedicate yourself to doing more strength training, you can certainly help preserve muscle mass. And that in turn is going to, we see injury risk kind of climb at those ages, probably because of less activity, but also probably because muscle mass and just overall physical function start to decline a little bit. So that age group, maybe take a day per week and do less endurance training and maybe just dedicate it all to strength training. So you might want to, put a little bit more time towards that as you age. And then, if you go up, say, another age group to that 60 to 70, probably, double that again. So maybe do another day per week of strength training. So I would just say place a priority more so on that as one gets older, but it should always kind of be a priority. But we do know that it becomes much easier to lose it at those older ages. And for someone like me, maybe even if you kind of stop doing it, you're probably going to maintain like your strength a little bit, even with that kind of small stimulus every single week. But you need a greater stimulus to maintain as you get older. So that's why, hence the recommendation to sort of devote a little bit more time to that during the week.
That makes sense.
But it doesn't actually require a lot. I will mention that. So
I think this is important. Good.
There is like this, not a misconception, but like that you, in contrast to endurance training, where unfortunately to sort of maintain VO2 max and performance, you just got to keep training a lot. Alan Couzens talks about this a lot, where like if you want to maintain your VO2 max into the 50s, man, you need to be exercising like 10 to 15 hours per week. For strength training, the dose seems to be really, really small. I mean, you can maintain muscle mass and strength with maybe 2 sessions per week of 1 to 2 hours each, or like 45 to 1 hour each. So 2, maybe 3 hours per week, if that, of exercising of, 5 to 6 different exercises, 4 to 5 sets, 8 to 12 reps. Like that's the minimum effective dose. It's really small for resistance training. And as long as you eat your protein, it seems pretty effective at maintaining muscle mass. So the dose of that is pretty small. The dose for endurance exercise for those who want to keep performing at a high level, unfortunately, is pretty high, it seems.
Well, and my favorite part of the sentence that goes with that data of losing 1% per year after age 40 is the next part that says all things being equal. Mm-hmm. And that's why the small dose is so effective, is because most people, the majority of the population, are doing nothing coming into their 40s. So the microdosing you're talking about, the exercise snacks that you're talking about are very effective because it's coming from zero. So if you're losing 1%, technically you only need to add a couple percent to make up for that. So yeah, absolutely. Let's go into biggest mistakes you see, not professional, still amateur runners, but high level. So yourself, folks in that 2:20 to 3 hour marathon range. What are the mistakes you see that are not paying off?
I think one of the main ones, and I recently talked about this on a different podcast, and this maybe has less to do with training and more about maybe prescribing your training or goal setting, is like, and this would probably go from people at my level to even just sort of recreational people, say in the 3 to 3.5 hour like marathon range, but often like picking a goal time and setting it, not based on where your physiology or your performance is currently at, but like just what you want to run. So Oh, you see this in a lot of like the running influencers and stuff, and not to pick on them, but it's, a trend where they want to run a sub 230 marathon, but they have like a PR of like a 248. It's like, what gives you the indication that you're going to be able to run a 230 marathon? It's a number that sounds nice. And the 3 hour barrier tends to be a very popular goal where, oh, I want to break 3 hours in the marathon. So people will set that goal time and then just say, I need to run this much per week. I need to run my training runs and my intervals at this pace. But that's kind of like setting yourself up for failure, because your physiology just might not be there. And it takes time maybe to get there. You're not going to run a 3 hour marathon just because you chose that goal and you're going to train towards it. You're kind of like forcing a round peg into a square hole, I guess is like what the saying goes. So rather than say do a time trial and then kind of say, well, what should I be able to run in 8 months based on what I just did in this time trial? And then kind of set your goals according to that versus work backwards. This is my goal. This is how I need to train. Of course, that can work, but more often than not, it might cause you to train like too hard or set unrealistic goals for your intervals and things like that and get out of your zone. So that's kind of one of the common things I see. And again, this goes back to just the whole social mediaification of running, where sub 3 hour marathon looks so good and I want to run this, and so I have to put this goal time out there and run it. And perhaps I've fallen in this to myself. I have my training log that I just put out, and it's called the Road to 220. So I've already kind of explicitly said I want to run a sub 220 marathon, but I don't know, given some of my recent performances, I don't think that seems too far out of the blue. But again, I think, most people, myself included, kind of sometimes set these goals in a backwards way, I guess.
Well, and I actually would say the opposite. I think you're very realistic, because you've gotten some pushback on, why don't you go for 218? Because what was your Boston time? 24?
2:24, 26. Yeah.
So Boston's harder than Sim. It's clearly harder. I mean, if you catch it on a perfect day with a tailwind, but I don't think you did. And so you're saying 4 minutes over a year and a half, right?
Well, I ran Boston
Was it
this
year. April? Okay, so over 8 months.
So 8 months
on an easier course with more knowledge, a better base. Like, your goal is a stretch and a very realistic, comprehensively achievable, not a gimme, but achievable goal. So I think you're actually setting a good example of that, of saying, I didn't say 220 for Boston. I was shooting for 225, got it. Now on an easier course with more buildup and better experience, 220 is there. It's not easy, but it's there. So I actually think you're modeling that well.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that as well. So, but I didn't want to pick on everyone else and say that I'm immune from also that goal setting.
I hear you.
So other mistakes, gosh, I think I will go. I mean, I don't know how rampant it is, and I use myself as an example with the nutrition thing, but I think a lot of runners sometimes just we know the importance of nutrition in terms of like protein and carbohydrate intake, but we all often don't practice kind of what maybe the science shows or what is optimal in terms of, I'll use the refueling kind of immediately after exercise, for example. I mean, lots of runners I talk to, and you'll see maybe lots of runners making videos and putting them on YouTube, say, I changed my fueling strategy. Now I know that I need to eat protein and carbs right after a workout. So I don't think that it's kind of a well-known thing. Like, everybody thinks like you should do it, but not everybody actually practices it. Most runners will kind of just say, hey, finish my workout and I drive home and I get a shower and then I eat breakfast. And so they practice that. Whereas, a lot of them now could be, changing up their routines for the better and getting the carbs in quick. And so it's one of the things that I think is fun about writing and sharing the science like I do, where I just want these little easy, practical, implementable strategies that I write about in this Substack article that runners can read and just go, oh my gosh, that's such a small change that I can make that might actually like improve my performance. So that's kind of another mistake I think runners at that level might make, just little tweaks to their fueling that could probably be somewhat better. That may be another one.
That's good. Question I wasn't going to ask you, but you got me curious talking about it. What's your rhythm? Because you put out now 2 very significant Substack articles a week. And it's not just Brady's opinion on the world. Like, you're digging into the research, you're providing a practical way to bring that into our lives. You're like, this is serious stuff. And sometimes I look at you, I'm like, I'm impressed, because you got young family, you're putting in the 80 miles, you're getting on the bike, and you're producing two very valuable, extensive, time-intensive articles. Any tips for folks that maybe they have some freedom in their life and they're thinking, how could I learn from Brady in that part of life?
Yeah. So, yeah, you are right. And I do think that one of the things, and I've changed that I think in terms of my rhythm and how I sort of work when it comes to the Substack and writing my blogs and newsletters and stuff like that, is I used to kind of be under this idea and this framework that I needed to sit down in front of my computer and just kind of write the article out all at once and put my deep focus in there. But obviously, when you have sort of a busy life and you're running from things like, like you said, I have a kid, I have training, I have another, a full-time job that I do in addition to like my Substack articles. What I find is that a lot of my work is integrated. So even my full-time job and then my Substack articles, everything that I'm doing basically is focusing on health, science, nutrition, exercise. So all of these ideas are kind of in my head all the time, which helps. I'm always kind of formulating things. I'm always thinking about what kind of article could this play into, or like, what do I want to write about for my next post? Or, oh, here's this interesting study. So all this information is kind of coming in. And so what I do, there's so many tools available now where you can transcribe things, you can talk to Chat GPT, you can transcribe notes and help that kind of formulate an article, or just talking to your iPhone and take notes. So I will work in like little bouts throughout the day where if I have an hour or something where I'm going on a walk or I'm in the car driving to daycare, I will sort of transcribe what I maybe want to write for an article, or kind of brainstorm ideas into my phone. And that stuff will obviously, end up as the finished product, but you're kind of you're working while you're doing other things. I guess I don't want to call it multitasking, but it's just like,
it's
I'm out
integrated.
on a walk.
It's an integrated
It's
work
all integrated.
life.
Right. So I can work on the news that I'm doing for writing for Friday while I'm taking the dog on a walk, or while I'm taking my kid on a walk in the stroller. So yeah, I'm not sitting down, devoting 4 extra hours per week, like in front of my desk when I actually write the article. Obviously I am, but you're sort of just working in little bits throughout the day on these different ideas and concepts that you're trying to pull together. So that's kind of one of the ways that my rhythm, that doesn't sound very rhythmic, but it kind of is in terms of how the structure of my day goes. So that's kind of one of my tactics that I use that I think allows me to be a little bit more productive, because when you really think about it, you can find these little extra periods of time during the day that you otherwise would have maybe wasted, like scrolling social media. Not that I don't waste time scrolling social media. I certainly do. But, I am like, okay, I'm going on a walk. I could, look at Twitter for 30 minutes, or I could open up my notes app and write the introduction to the article that I want to write for my newsletter on this Friday. But I do really think that the biggest thing that allows me to just kind of be a little bit more productive in that way is that all of these aspects of my job and my life are kind of integrated, and you're always thinking about these things rather than it's this separate thing that, if I had a job as an accountant and now I also want to write this physiology newsletter. Well, those are kind of like two very disparate areas of life, but it's like health, performance, running, endurance. That's all like I'm thinking about when it comes to my job. And so there's a lot of overlap.
Right. That makes sense. And I love that life design. That's a beautiful thing.
But of course, the other thing is sometimes, just after the kid goes down and we eat dinner, my wife goes to bed, I'm working from at 8 to 10 at night to get my newsletter done on Friday morning, which ends up usually being the case. But I don't mind that either. Like sometimes I find that 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. has, a couple times per week, I'll say to my wife, she'll go upstairs and she just wants to watch a show and go to bed. I'm like, I'm going to work for a couple extra hours. That time of day is very quiet and actually kind of allows me to think. Sometimes I write good in the morning, but sometimes like I'll go on, put on a football game on the TV, sit on the couch and just like have 2 hours of nothing. And I kind of find that time very relaxing. And that's when I often work on like either one of my newsletters during the week.
Love that. That's great. Key metrics outside of the mileage. What are things you track? For example, HRV, resting heart rate, sleep. Are you doing any lab testing on a quarterly or semi-annual basis? Walk us through some of those data points that you've found to be valuable personally.
For sure. So in regards to maybe some of these like health metrics that I get from my wearable, I do like looking at resting heart rate. I do like looking at my readiness score, my sleep score sometimes, although I think those metrics can sometimes have limited value because of what I find. At least I use Oura Ring to track some of my metrics, and it skews heavily towards your sleep score is basically dependent on how long that you slept in regards to the other metrics like maybe quality and efficiency. Let's play less into that. So you can sleep for 9 hours, but if it was crappy quality, you're still gonna have a high sleep score. So I don't really pay attention much to that. HRV, I'll kind of keep an eye on, but I don't find that it changes much. And I know that there are like lots of limitations unless you're measuring it really precisely with some of this like lab grade equipment. But resting heart rate, I find to be very valuable in terms of predicting kind of where my physiology is at. And paradoxically, a suppression of my resting heart rate actually seems to be more predictive of whether I'm kind of in a overreached state versus elevated. And that's one of the things I kind of like to preach continually when people are asking me about readiness metrics and things like that, or metrics during training that might predict whether you're like overly stressed or overtrained that day. Because what a lot of people will tell you, if you were just to ask the general person, what happens to your resting heart rate, or how do you tell if you're overreached? They're like, oh my gosh, I'll go out on a run. My heart rate is like 10 to 15 beats per minute higher than normal. So elevated heart rate, elevated resting heart rate, elevated exercise heart rate. For me, and for a lot of other people, maybe endurance athletes that I've talked to, it's the opposite.
Exactly.
Suppressed resting heart rate, suppressed heart rate during exercise. And actually, again, I keep going back to, maybe this was timely, but the workout that I did today, I could almost tell immediately when I started my warm up, I'm like, this is going to be a day where I'm not going to be able to hit that extra gear. And it's well known, and it's also kind of explainable in terms of like your body's kind of just, for whatever reason, you're overreaching. So sympathetic nervous system maybe a bit cooked, maybe you haven't been eating enough carbs, but your body is just putting a limit basically on the gears that you can hit. So what I find is that if I'm out on a run and my heart rate will just not go high, or there's like not a lot of variability in it, and not my heart rate variability, but just like you'll just see a flat line like, oh, my heart rate was 140 during that entire run. Well, that's weird. That's not how it should work, because you're going up hills, you're speeding up, you're slowing down. It should be like very variable. But if it's just like a flat line, then like something's wrong. Similarly with resting heart rate, if it's a little bit lower than normal, that sometimes is a cue for me that, maybe it probably shouldn't be 31 to 32. Like 35 to 36 overnight is typical for me. But if it's like 31, 32, maybe I'm doing something, maybe I'm not like rested enough. So heart rate, definitely something I look for, but everybody has to learn their patterns in terms of how it works. So maybe yours is high, maybe yours is low. So I think everybody needs to look at their own metrics to determine that. So I like that metric a lot. I pay attention to that more than I do my sleep. For sleep, I kind of You've got a kid in the morning. Yeah. It's not going to be great. How do I wake up? Do I feel well rested? That's my metric of sleep. Blood testing, I don't do it regularly, but soon I'm going to actually return to doing like a monthly blood test. So I use this company called Rhythm Health, and they basically will ship you a kit to your house. You draw blood yourself. You send it off in the mail, and they do your blood and they send you the results back. So Rhythm Health, for those people who are interested in it, it's one of the bbest things that I've used because, again, you do it all at home. You don't have to go to a clinic. You don't have to get a blood test. So interesting company for people to check out. They also have an app you can view all your results online. We'll give you recommendations for supplements and things like that, even to fix and correct things. So I will be using them. I used them for a while, and then my subscription lapsed because I didn't send one of my samples in. But getting back to that, so the problem with that is I got to find out how to use it. Data is great. I love having, a monthly blood test is awesome, but what are you going to do that? So something I'm learning to sort of take action on in terms of, what do these blood markers mean? What do I actually need to look at? I certainly don't need to look at 120 things, but out of these 120 things that I get, which ones are valuable? So I do like using that as well. So let's see. I think some of the other things that I look at, so not the blood, the blood testing, the sleep metrics. One thing I recently started tracking, and an experiment that I will maybe continue, is just calories and overall macronutrients. It's not very precise, so I'm not weighing my food. I'm not being so meticulous about it, because you can spend 1 to 2 extra hours a day if you actually want to track down to the calorie what you're doing. It's very tedious, and I don't know. Some people do that. It's not something that I've ever done. But recently, I've just kind of been interested in tracking, not necessarily obviously to limit, but just say what does my macronutrient breakdown look like? What do my calories look like? Am I eating enough to sustain energy, to sustain output? But in particular, just looking at macros, so carbs, protein, and fat, and more so carbs, because I've been interested lately in placing more of an emphasis on carbs. I think that, like most people, I tend to sometimes be a little more protein focused, especially at meals, where I'm like, the meal centers around protein, and then carbs are built around that. You have your veggies, you have your carbs, but your protein is the center of that. And what I found with tracking actually for the past couple of weeks is like, I'm probably overeating protein a little bit. I could be eating less protein and more carbs. So I'm typically getting well over a gram per pound of body weight per day. And I think that that's great. Wow. But I could probably eat a little bit less and favor carbohydrates. So I'm probably getting, again, this is very imprecise. So I've been using just an app to track it. Sometimes you take a picture, you scan some barcodes. So it's, there's certainly a margin of error there. But carb intake tends to land between 400 and 500 a day. And again, like I said, with protein, it's about maybe 150 to 180 per day. So what I've been trying to do is sort of dial back that protein just a little bit, not a ton. I mean, protein is important for endurance athletes, but I could probably favor more carbohydrates. So that's something I'm actually learning by tracking. Tracking is something I stayed away from in the past because I can get into sort of a dangerous territory. It's just, you naturally just tend, I think when you track, you just naturally tend to restrict, whether you are conscious of it or not. But when
as an endurance athlete, especially, it's clearly a red flag. Yes,
for sure it is. And that's why I've stayed away with it in the past. But I think knowing that it's somewhat imprecise, because sometimes you're just snapping a picture and AI is saying, oh, this is the breakdown of it. I'm just not too concerned. So I'm trying to track without then altering kind of my behavior around that. And I found it useful. So I don't know if I'll continue it, but I'm learning a few things in terms of how I might be able to sort of just make these small tweaks to what I'm eating, especially maybe I'd like to up my carb intake by probably maybe 100 to 200 grams per day, and maybe eat, 30 to 40 grams less of protein, which would still be a lot of protein, still, almost, 0.8, something like that grams per pound, which I think is certainly enough.
It's definitely in the ballpark. So you actually, great message on carbs. I think that's gotten forgotten over the last, 20 years ago, you're writing for Bart now, but 20 years ago, it was the thing. And then it's like, oh no, too much. But what really got me, what you said is you just kind of threw in there, I'm 145, 150 grams a day of protein. And I'm like, what? Because I struggled. I shoot for about 100, 110, and which is kind of that 0.8 range that you're talking about. We're going to interview Stuart Phillips. I don't know if you know Stuart, but amazing resource when it comes to protein. He'll be on in a few weeks. But how do you get 145 without realizing? I know you realize it, but you know what I mean? Like, you kind of said it like, I kind of turn around and there's 145. And I'm like, how in the world would you get 145? I have friends that are struggling to get to 70.
Really, man, I don't know. I think it's maybe just this kind of hyper focus at meals, but I don't find it hard to get there at all.
Well, give me a simple, give me a yesterday or whatever, or a day that you just, there's 145, boom, like that.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll just go through, try as quickly as possible, like what I ate yesterday. And I don't know, I don't have my phone in front of me, but I think yesterday I probably ate 100 and maybe 50-ish grams of protein. So for breakfast, I had 4 eggs, 2 yolks, and then 2 of them I took the yolks out. Okay. So I'll do like half and half yolks, half whites. I'm not worried about cholesterol, but you can get the protein without that extra fat. So I try to do 4 eggs for breakfast. That was on.
Okay, so that's a ramp up right out of the gate. So
that's 30. That's 30 grams of protein right there. Right. Then I had also a Greek yogurt. That's got 20 grams of protein in it. So that's 50 grams of protein.
50, and you haven't even got a.
And I think I also had with that English muffin, and then maybe a serving of granola. So let's just say, I don't know, maybe an extra 10 grams of protein there combined. So I just got, boom, that's 60 to 70 at breakfast.
Well, there's a great example. So now it's easy to get to 150.
For sure. So lunch, I've been doing, I'm not a vegetarian, but I've been doing sort of a plant-based lunch. I'll do like rice and beans, and then I'll have like a protein bar, sometimes with 20 grams of protein. So I'm probably getting another 40 grams of protein at lunch. And then for dinner, that's typically when we're going to have like some sort of meat. So I think, yesterday for dinner, we ordered like Indian foods. We had chicken, we had some lamb. So I'm certainly getting 50 to 60 grams of protein at dinner.
Sure.
Yeah. And then maybe like sometimes I'll have a protein bar or something for dessert. So, 15 to 20 grams of protein at dessert. So, I mean, yeah, it's really easy for me to get protein. But again, I think not necessarily like a good thing. I think that I could maybe eat, when it comes to being a snack, whenever I'm having a snack, I'm like, okay, let's get some protein in the snack, but maybe I just eat a snack that's carbs. Can I just have like a peanut butter sandwich with a banana? That's not necessarily protein heavy. So changes like that. But yeah, I always find it interesting when people say that it's hard to get the protein. And I mean, maybe, everybody's different in terms of what they like to eat and, how much they can
60
eat.
Out of the gate. It's not even 9 a.m. yet. That's
right.
Yeah, you're ahead of the game there.
And if you think about it, Brad, I mean, if you're eating, which I am, probably right now around 3,500 calories a day, it's almost impossible that you're not going to get 150 grams of protein. I mean, you only have 3 macros that you can eat. So unless you're eating a keto diet where your fat intake is just sky high, and I'm not anti-fat, but I don't eat low fat. I don't necessarily add extra fat to stuff. Yeah. So if protein and carbs are your focus, I mean, you can only eat so much of either. And if you're eating enough calories, you're going to eat a lot of protein as a result.
And this is getting deeper in the nutrition than we need to, but just real quick. So 4 eggs and a yogurt is a typical breakfast, is an anomaly. The egg research seems to change every third day, but I'm with you. I don't think there's any issue with it at this point. But for a day, you're having almost 30 a week. What's your brain say about that?
Yeah, usually I think wouldn't say I eat for every single day. Sometimes it's more often it's like 2. Yesterday was just maybe an egg heavy breakfast. Usually it's 2. I'll have an English muffin, put an egg on each of them or something like that. Delicious. So maybe 2. Yeah, it's a great breakfast. And some days though, some days I don't have a full breakfast that I don't have time. Maybe it's just 2 protein bars. So, not eggs every day, but yeah, I would say that's more common than not. I've been trying to lean heavy on the breakfast and then sort of not dial down how much I'm eating, but in the past I would leave like a ton of calories for dinner, and then you're just eating this huge dinner and like kind of going to bed full. And I've been trying to front load sort of my calories more in terms of around that big workout. So eggs, English muffins, yogurt, and then, still a big lunch, and then like not a small dinner by any means, but smaller. Yeah, smaller. I don't want to save 1,500 calories for dinner and just have to eat this massive dinner. I don't often find that optimal.
It's the American way, man. What are you talking about?
It is. Yeah, I know.
But that's not working too well.
Not the circadian way, though.
Exactly. All right, super shoes. When do you use in training? How do you use them in training? We had a little brief chat offline about that. Do they lose their spark after a certain number of miles before you see actual wear in the sole? Those kinds of things. Do you have I'm not going to use for sim. You got a race December 7th. Are you going to have new shoes teed up that you use for 2 workouts and then marathon? Or are you like, they're good. It's overblown. So when to use, how to integrate into training. Do they lose their spark?
Yep. So I would say, I'm running 5 days per week. 3 of those days, I'm pretty much running in super shoes. So my long run is always in super shoes, regardless of the intensity now. Workout day is in super shoes. And then another training day. So, there's this different category now. They call them super trainers. So super shoes are like the ones you race in. Nike Alpha Fly. They're like the heavy. Right. They're the big
$300. Yeah.
Super trainers are, they got the plush foams, but they're not going to have the carbon plate in there. And then you just have your daily trainers. So 1 day per week, I'm going to be running in like a super trainer, something that's real cushy, heavily cushioned, some of these more advanced foams. Long run super shoes, workout days super shoes. So 3 days per week, I'm in super shoes. It may be super trainers 2 days per week, honestly. And then one other day I might just run in something that's, everything's pretty highly cushioned these days. I'm a big fan of highly cushioned shoes. So a highly cushioned shoe, but one that's not, advanced footwear technology, I guess is how you would describe it.
So let me review those again because I lost you. I want to make sure. So You're running 5 days a week. 3 days are in classic super shoes. 2 days a week are in super trainers. And then if you have a 6th day in there or a second run during the day, that's just going to be in a standard trainer. Did I hear that right, or am I mixing and matching?
Two super shoe. So 2 of like the, say, Alpha Fly version where carbon plate foams, 2 super trainers, and then 1 day just like a typical daily trainer.
Okay.
And there is kind of a thought process behind all that. So one of the days where I'm in the daily trainer is like, I don't think every single run should be in a super shoe, because I just think that there's something to running in something that is not actually going to help you run that much better, to kind of just keep your leg strength and build your leg strength. Not that super shoes take away from it, but I just think you should run in something that's not propelling you forward every single day. And the super trainers are kind of like that as well. So I like just kind of running the classic shoe for that reason, just like not always having this aid on your foot.
Well, and it's just balancing out your body too. It's like running the opposite way on the track every once in a while when you're doing your warm down. You don't do the same counterclockwise every single time. So yeah, keep going.
Exactly. So I like that. I like the super trainers for medium long kind of runs if I'm going anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours. Again, maybe those are going to be a little more up tempo or have some type of like faster running in them. So I like the super trainer just for a little bit extra bounce. And then the super shoes, obviously for the workouts, because you're kind of trying to optimize speed, optimize your efficiency there, and for the long run, just because you're on your feet for, 2 hours, 15 minutes to 2 hours, 45 minutes, sometimes maybe even 3 hours. And so for one, it's obviously about performance. If you're going fast, you want to wear a super shoe. You want to get your legs ready for them, because as a lot of people, and I made this mistake before, but before my first ever marathon, that was a couple years ago, I never really did long runs or faster efforts in my super shoe, and I got massive calf cramps because of it. So you got to train to run in those just like you do any other shoe, because they do change your biomechanics, as I'm sure you know. But it's also from the just recovery and beating up your legs perspective. I mean, it's crazy the difference between you do a 20-mile long run in just a normal shoe versus super shoes. The day after, if I run them in super shoes, I feel like I could do another one. I feel like I could do 20 miles back to back and feel fine. They just allow you to run more. I mean, it's really, and that's kind of why these days I'm a little bit more in favor of, I used to be against it, say, you should only use your super shoes very sparingly if you're just trying to go fast.
Right.
Now I'm like, if you're an experienced runner and your biomechanics are fine and you can run well in super shoes, I don't see a reason why you shouldn't wear them more often than not, because they allow you, especially, we sometimes keep bringing back into this component of aging, especially if you're 40s, 50s, 60s, you can just run more and you can run faster in these super shoes with less injury risk. I think you can increase your injury risk if you're not accustomed to them, but you can reduce it as well because they are just distributing the load differently. They just allow you to train more. And so I think why not wear them as much as you can, in the right way, and if your budget allows for it.
Well, and that's a key factor. So let's talk about this spark element, because if you're wearing these 3 times a week at your 80 miles a week average, you're putting 50 at least miles on these super shoes every single week. So in 6 weeks, you've got your 300 miles already. But you're not caring about performance on these runs. Well, you kind of are, but not really. You're caring about adaptation. So how do you pattern that so you're not, because I know you're not a trust fund kid. So how are you making that work with a budget and your wife still loves you?
Yeah. So that is a good question. I definitely have a couple pairs of shoes that are these are only for races. And then a couple pairs of super shoes that are for training. So luckily, I do occasionally these shoe reviews with Zach Bitter, where and we've been testing shoes. So we've gotten a lot of free pairs, luckily, and Zach has been great with kind of getting us the connections and hooking us up with those. So I have probably 3 or 4 pairs of super shoes that I will just reserve for training, something that I'm not going to wear in the race, because I find for racing, once the shoe hits probably about 150, I'll stop racing in it. And that will be relegated to training. And then I'll train in it until 300, 400 miles. And then about 400 miles, I think you should just toss your super shoes. They've kind of lost their spark, as you will call it, after then. Some people will continue to run in them after then, but you can just kind of feel it. they might be better than a regular trainer, but they're not giving you much. They're kind of worn down by then. So that's kind of my process behind it. I'll race in a super shoe for, obviously depending on what the race is, but for up to about 150 miles. After that, it gets retired to training, and then I'll just train in it until subjectively I feel that it's reached the end of its lifespan. So yeah, I think for maybe runners who are, I'm obviously budget conscious, but for runners who may be more budget conscious, buy a pair of super shoes. Just say, I'm just going to race in these only. And then buy another pair that you're going to train in, because they'll last you a bit longer. It'll extend the life of your racing super shoes, and then it'll allow you to get that super shoe boost in training without, using your racing shoe. You could also, again, buy a super trainer for this, which typically go for about $100 less than your super shoe. And that's kind of one of the benefits of the trainers, and they can give you kind of a similar benefit there. But that is my thought process there. For CIM, I will probably buy a new pair. I do have these Pumas that I've only raced in once and that I might race in for CIM. So I'm trying not to do a lot of training in those because I want them to be fresh. But
they're different than the Alpha Fly, right? I mean, the feel and the spark. So it almost seems like you need to adapt to that before sim, don't you?
I'll certainly do like a long run in them just to see, because the race I've done was just a very, very short race. So I'll probably do a long run workout or something in them just to say, how are these going to fare for the marathon? And if they're not something that I think will go over that distance maybe, or something that I don't feel that great, I'll probably just go with the good old Alpha Fly, good old reliable Alpha Fly, and probably buy a new pair. We'll see. They might have the Alpha Fly 4 by then. Who knows? Early Christmas present maybe.
Good timing for Nike on that one. Oh man, I'm watching the clock here. Let's jump to my Brady question here. So pause with this, take your time. Perfect world training. A lot of our conversation so far has been around, life hits, you've got this responsibility, you've got this. Let's say that you've got 6 months, no responsibilities. You are there to train. So you can schedule in as much strength training, as much sauna time, as much cycling time, sleep schedule. Like, what does your week look like if you have no responsibilities outside? You're Connor Mance now. You have no responsibilities outside of training. What would you add to what you've described to us? What would you tweak? What would you develop? What would you expand? What would you shrink?
Man, this is a very interesting thought experiment. So for one, I think I would shift, maybe without any structure at all, but I would shift the timing probably of all my training sessions. I would start at 9 in the morning probably, as opposed to 6:30 or 7 like I'm starting now, just because naturally, I mean, I don't think anybody, Brad, runs at 5 a.m. because they want to. I think they do it because we have life responsibilities. We need to be done with our run by 7 a.m. I mean, objectively, it's worse running at 6 a.m. versus 8. The later in the day you run, typically the better you feel. So I would probably start my runs between 8 and 9, or just, I'd wake up in the morning, have a little breakfast, have some coffee, and get out for the run. So I'd start it at 8 and 9. I wouldn't really change anything about what I'm doing in terms of my running or my cycling training. So I think I would still continue to run 5 days a week, cycle 2 days per week. I would certainly double more. So I think I would add a second afternoon run 3 or 4 days per week, more often than not, just because even without increasing volume, I think doing doubles instead of singles is maybe a safer, a little bit more effective way to kind of improve your fitness sometimes. So I would double most days, work out twice both days, once in the morning, once in the afternoon.
So let's pause on that one just for a second. Yeah. You've written a lot about durability. We interviewed Brad Culp about the Norwegian method, so we took a deep dive into the love of doubles. But doesn't that diminish that durability element?
Yes, it does. And so I guess I will, backtrack a little bit and say I would still make sure you're doing a 90 plus minute run a couple times per week, and either adding that double on there. So don't split up all your runs into 2, because I do think then you sacrifice some of that durability. And so I want to get, your 80 to 90 minute morning run, and then your afternoon run of, 5 or 6 miles or something like that. Or maybe it's just an easy 3-mile shakeout with some strides or something like that. I don't know. Just a little extra stimulus in the afternoon, I think is always good. So yeah, I do. Thanks for bringing that up though, because I think that's important to note. It's honestly one of the reasons why I think this 5 day per week split is working for me for marathon training is because we think
Compressing.
about 85 miles a week on 5 days of running. I mean, I'm running 17 to 18 miles a day on average. So it's all in singles mostly. I double, once or twice a week or once a week usually. So that would be the addition, the addition of a double. Then the strength training thing would be huge. I think that would be probably the biggest change. I would get in the gym 2 to 3 days per week. Let's just say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or maybe Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. So put the strength training day on after the day of the long run, but after the long run, obviously. I would do strength training 2 to 3 days per week, probably 30 to 45 minutes. You don't need to be in there as long as like a bodybuilder, but getting in there, doing the work. That would probably be the biggest change. And then, so, I do the morning run, go to the gym, strength training, get in the sauna for 30 minutes immediately after that. That would be 3 days per week.
So let's pause on the strength training now. So you've probably noticed this, but I notice when I'm injured running, my strength training blossoms. When I'm running well, my strength, like they're just X's on the graph. So not have you, because your schedule maybe doesn't allow it, but would you experiment with greater separation? So you mentioned Saturday, I'm going to do gym, I'm going to do my long run that day and go right to the gym. Would you? Or if you were totally flexible, would you do your long run, build 3 or 4 hours in between, and then hit the gym? Or are you thinking, no, that gives me more durability because if I'm in the gym on tired, like there's so many variables here, but in your mind, what are some of those crossovers that you would take advantage of if you had no other responsibilities?
Yeah, I would still finish the run and go right to the gym afterwards. Eat a little bit of something. So have a protein bar, a nutrition bar or two, maybe a small little breakfast, and then just go straight to the gym. Several reasons. I think one of the ones is just that you're warmed up. And as long as you kind of eat something and maybe you fueled during that run, I don't think you're going to maybe have a compromised gym session because of it. So maybe you have 30 to 45 minutes in between just to account for the commute, but I would do it right after. I just think it prevents that up from the run, then down, and then I get up again to get into the gym. Your body's already warm. You have all the neurotransmitters flowing.
The brain too.
The brain's in there as well. So I just think leave as little time between the run and the gym session as possible, and then have that 5-6 hour recovery window before like the afternoon run if I'm going to be doing that. That's kind of the structure, and that's how I think about it. I always like doing the strength just as soon as after as I can.
Okay.
Just keep the momentum going.
And then you said right into the sauna after the strength training. Would you increase from 3 days a week in the sauna to 5 or no?
Yeah.
I think because again, perfect world.
Yeah. In a perfect world, I'd probably be saunaing every single day. Let's go 5 days per week. I don't think every day you need to do it. So I would be in the sauna 5 days per week if I had, the perfect world, the professional athlete life of training. Yeah, I'd be doing it 5 days per week, probably 20 to 30 minutes each time.
Okay. Anything else you'd throw in there if you didn't have any other time restriction or money restrictions?
Yeah, without time or money restrictions, I'd say what I would also add probably 3 times per week is a dedicated recovery session. That would include something like, I think the sauna could play into that, but again, the sauna can sometimes be training. Dedicated, say like a cold water immersion, a massage, or something like Normatec boots, where you're getting in the boots for 20 to 30 minutes. We have this awesome recovery lab here in Austin. It's called the Generator Recovery Lab, and they have something called the Protocol. So you go there, you do 30 minutes infrared sauna, you do 15 minutes contrast, so cold tub, hot tub for 15 minutes. Then you do Normatec boots. So it's fantastic. You feel like $1 million after you do it. So if I would do that 2 or 3 days per week if I had, the time to do it. Aside from that, I would schedule a massage or something. So definitely 3 days per week of like, I'm going to do some sort of recovery protocol, because really right now it's nothing like that. It's like some foam rolling and then you sleep and eat. That's your recovery protocol, but something active recovery is what we'll call it versus say passive recovery.
Okay, good. Speaking of recovery, resisting the urge to do just a bit more. My wife is she's She's so wise. And she continually reminds me that I always get injured when I make the phrase or I state it out loud, I'm just going to sneak in, fill in the blank. She's like that. Like, I know when you're going to be hurt because you always say, well, I'm just going to sneak in a hard run. I'm just going to sneak in 5 more miles. How do you resist that urge? It is, maybe it's just me, but it's like I'm feeling, and there's days that you're just feeling good and you just need to take advantage of it. But overall, how do you resist the urge to say, I'll just do a 3-hour bike. I'll just do a 23-hour or mile run, et cetera, et cetera.
No, you're not the only one. It's certainly hard. And it's easy to tell yourself, say when you're injured or coming back from an injury, this time I will be smarter. I'm just going to hold back. And I don't necessarily know how I do it because I'm not great at it. But I think the best thing for me is just trying to have some forethought and think about, what I've done in the past. And I mean, it's funny you bring it up because I think at where I'm at in my training right now, I'm fighting very hard to resist that urge because the allure of, say, getting back to running 100-mile weeks is certainly there for me. And if I just, in my mind, if I just run one more extra day per week, right, I can get to 100 miles.
More doubles, I'm there.
Right. And so I think what I do to tell myself is you're running consistently more, than you ever have in previously training blocks. You're more consistent. You're not injured right now. And so I guess it's just this mindset that I would rather be, and again, it's hard to stick to this, but my mindset has just kind of been like, I would rather be a tad bit less trained than I think I could be doing 85% of what I think I could be doing versus I'm going to tick it up a little bit and just get injured and not be able to train for several months. There's nothing worse. This as much as I do, but there's nothing worse than like not being able to train. I would prefer to be a little bit undertrained than injured and not being able to train. And I've gone so long now, almost 2 years without being injured, that I keep trying to remind myself, this is so fun right now. You like this? Let's keep this up. And if you push more than you think, you should, and end up being injured, you're going to be kicking yourself. So I don't really have any strategies to do it. I think having these life constraints, like you were just talking about, is actually a blessing in disguise sometimes for people. Because if I had the freedom to do whatever I wanted in my day, I would train all day and I would probably end up being injured. So having these other things, and as much as I love running and like it's a huge part of my life and I'm always thinking about it, having these other things in life is sometimes a good thing because it, other things to dedicate your time to instead of just, if I have nothing else to do, well, okay, why not? Why not go on a second run? Whereas, if you can't because you have these time constraints, that kind of holds you back. So you kind of have these self-limiters, but really just telling myself, this is fun. You're going to keep getting better at the training that you're doing right now. You don't need to do this extra. That's kind of really what's helping me rein it in right now. But I'm certainly at a point right now where, especially after watching like something like the Chicago Marathon this weekend, and you see everybody running PRs and Mance PRing, I'm just like, man, I really want to run a 2:19 in December. And if I start doing double thresholds, like I know I can get there. It's just all these different scenarios, but I'm just trying to be patient and realizing it's kind of a long game at this point. And I will eventually, run that time, and maybe I don't need to do it in December. Maybe I do it December 2026 or something like that. But just kind of giving my body the time and realize that I'm still learning and still kind of building my running body back to what it was when I could do 100 miles per week, even though I'm better now than I was when I was running 110 miles per week.
It's good perspective.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to look at these life constraints as our bubble wrap. It's protecting us.
I think that's a great framework for sure.
Brady, I got several more, but let's just chat caffeine and then we can wrap it up. You've been very, very generous with your time.
No, this is great, Brad. I could do this all day. It's fun.
So caffeine in all contexts. Gordo likes to talk about the fact that he's eliminated it completely from Gordo Burn, for folks that don't know what we're talking about. You've talked about how to use it in the race. I just saw somebody else posting about, knowing your timing. So are you a 20-minute responder, a 40-minute responder, et cetera? So talk to us about caffeine, pre-race, in the race, and life.
So yeah, as much as I love coffee and, I drink coffee every day, if I really look at my overall caffeine intake during the day, it's not incredibly high. I mean, maybe 200, 400 milligrams per day, 400 max for sure. I think a lot of runners think that they're consuming a lot, but if I really think about it, I'm brewing my cup of coffee in the morning, but before my run, I may be drinking half of it. I might have 50 to 60 milligrams of caffeine. So it's not huge, but I certainly think that it can be a performance enhancer if used in the right dose. And I think if you're using it pre-race, pre-workout, having it 60 minutes before, that's kind of if you look at the metabolism of caffeine, it's going to peak about 30, 45, 60 minutes after you ingest it, depending on obviously on the form that you ingest it in and your personal caffeine metabolism. So pre-race, definitely a performance enhancer. It's interesting because some people will argue, they'll say it's not really a performance enhancer. It's just that most people are tolerant of caffeine, and so you need caffeine to just get you back up to baseline. So it's not enhancing performance, you just perform worse without it. I don't really buy that. I think it's actually ergogenic. It's actually helping you perform better. So pre-race, certainly I like doing it during, if you're going to be working out for 2 hours or something, and I like to take it around halfway. So if I'm doing energy gels, I'll mix in a caffeine gel, say at as like my second gel. So an hour into, say, a 2-hour run or something like that is when I'll like to use it. If you're running a marathon, people will take gels, but it's like, if you're running a 3-hour marathon, don't take a caffeine gel at 2 hours and 45 minutes. Like, that's kind of just useless. You could take your regular gel probably, but probably caffeine gel's not doing much there. And I don't like to do a ton. So maybe I like the gels that have like 50 to 75 milligrams or something. So just a little hit of caffeine during the race. I like using it there. And then in terms of everyday life, this is something that's so individual too. In terms of how I use it, I know there's a lot of debate out there, and people are like, oh, I have an espresso and I can go to bed. And then there are people in the neuroscience realm who will argue, yeah, but it's like changing your sleep architecture during sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know if I buy that. I really think that I could drink an espresso and go to bed and it has zero impact on my sleep quality. I think I'm a super fast caffeine metabolizer, like incredibly quick. And so I think it has a lot to do with that. I don't drink it at night. I'll cut off my caffeine by like 4 to 5 p.m. I'll have a Diet Coke maybe with dinner sometimes. There's not a ton of caffeine in there, like 50 milligrams maybe. But, I'll have a coffee, or like right now I'm drinking a yerba mate. And so I'll have some caffeine late afternoon, 2, 3, if I'm kind of feeling like a little bit of lag. And yeah, I'll cut it off, at 5 p.m. or something like that. And typically have no issues doing that. So it's very, individual in terms of like when people can have it, but that's kind of how I use it. Don't overuse it for sure. But I just use it as the cognitive enhancer that it is.
Well, and in that race, so you talked about, you like the 50 to 75 milligrams, you're running 220. So are you you're doing a pre-race caffeine of some sort, cup of coffee to get your bowels moving or whatever. And then you're starting off with the caffeine and then taking it at an hour and maybe an hour and 40. Like, do you time that, or is it a single dose in your race? And folks, you're going to have to add an extrapolator to this if you're a 3 or a 4 or 5 hour marathoner. But for you, Brady, where are you integrating that on race day in a 220, 230 type event?
Yeah. So usually if I'm doing a pre-race gel, I'll do a pre-race caffeine gel. And then again, my second gel. So
before you start, like literally
we're about to go. Immediately, like right on the starting line. Yeah. Cause I'm not a huge pre-race breakfast eater as much as, I try to eat something before if I'm doing a marathon, maybe like a bagel, depending on how long I wake up. But I just, I don't like to have like a super full stomach or have any breakfast or, have to go to a bathroom a second time before the race. So I sometimes rely on gels just before the race to kind of fuel and know that if I'm going to fuel adequately during, then I'll be fine. So yeah, but like right before the start, I'll just have a gel during my warm up. Basically, you just kind of like sip on a gel with caffeine, and then I'll have one at an hour, and that's probably it. So I guess depending on the gels I use, it might have 100 milligrams. So yeah, 100 milligrams at an hour, and then probably nothing for the rest of the race. Again, I kind of just rely that like I might have some of that caffeine flowing throughout my system the entire time, and I don't want to overdo it. But that's typically my protocol there regarding it. So 1 at the start, 1 halfway. That's about it. Again, if you're running for maybe 3 hours as opposed to 220, you might want to take another one at 2 hours. So every hour during exercise, maybe 100 milligrams of caffeine or so. I think that'll do the job.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Man, brother, great stuff. Congrats on all your success. Keep bringing it. You are bringing so much value to the community. Really appreciate it out there. If you're not hearing that, let me say that for many, many people. But this was fantastic, as I knew it would be, and just keep up the great work.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, I think it was fun to come and chat. Obviously, I love talking running and training, but it's, as you know, like anybody who reads my Substack will know, I kind of like sometimes talking about the outskirts of actual training. You know, I'm not a running coach. I mean, I obviously am a runner and I have a physiology background, but sometimes what interests me more is this very tangential stuff, the nutrition, the sleep, the supplements. Like I like that stuff sometimes a little bit more, and how that can impact your running, because there are people much smarter than me who are able to talk about training prescriptions and training distributions. That's not kind of, I think, where my interests or specialties lie. So coming on here to chat about all the interesting, little tidbits
Connectors.
on running and connectors, was a lot of fun. So I appreciate it. And, same with you. Keep doing the great work of spreading the word. And I'm looking forward to your interview with Stu Phillips. That'll be a fun one. Protein's such a popular and for some reason controversial topic, but Stu is great. So
Thanks again, brother. Really appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Brad.
Good stuff, Brady. I am looking forward to seeing you knock out a great day at the Sim Marathon next month. And I'm actually leaning towards the same event this time next year, so we'll see what happens. Thanks for joining us here on the podcast. If you've been considering pursuing your MBHWSC approved coach certification, now is the time. Our first cohort for 2026 kicks off in January, includes all the latest updates from the MBHWSC, including a complimentary study group for those pursuing the National Board exam. All the details on our Institute site, catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or email us anytime with questions. Results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com, and we'll set up some time to talk about your specific situation and your potential plans. And now, it's time to be a Catalyst. This is Catalyst Coaching's 360, Dr. Brad Cooper. Make it a great rest of your week, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Coaching Lab podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.